Hello, this is Dr. Sridhar Moti. Here in this lecture series on contract management. The next topic I am going to cover today is on contract management functions. I have been teaching this contract management as a subject as a visiting faculty to numerous teaching and training institutes. I also authored a book on infrastructure contracts and management, published by Asia Law House, which is available in Amazon. I'm just going to share the glimpse of the book. The takeaways expected from this lesson would be performance aspects under the contract, contractual obligations, contractual correspondence, how to write correspondence and how to deal with the correspondence, maintenance of site records and documentation aspects, duties and functions of contract manager, importance of reconciliation of materials. We all understand that a contract is nothing but a legally enforceable agreement which is having legal implications, which creates obligations. Also, the contract generates rights, defines duties. On performance of a duty as an obligation, a right is generated under the contract. Let us understand it in a simple way. Suppose we both, you and me, have entered into a contract. You have something, a goods, say iPhone, just to second-hand iPhone, you want to sell it to me. I have just promised to pay rupees 50,000 to you. What we have just made in a contract is, I'll on soon after entering into your agreement, I'll pay you 50,000 within a week, and within a week of receipt of money, you will transfer and give the possession of iPhone to me. That is the contract. Now, as we have also understood, a contract is a reciprocal agreement, means it generates reciprocal promises. Now, what are the obligations and rights under this contract for you and me? Within signing of an agreement, as a seller, you are entitled to receive rupees 50,000 from me within a week as per the agreement terms. Means it is my obligation to pay rupees 50,000 to you after signing of the agreement within a week. So that is my obligation. It is your contractual right to receive the payment from me. So my obligation is your right. I have given the money to you. Then on performance of my part of the obligation, now I generate a right to get the iPhone, right? So when I fulfilled my obligation as a duty, I generate a right under the contract, right? Now it is your duty to hand over the phone to me. It is your obligation. So my obligation is your right. Your obligation is my right. That's all. A contract is an agreement which is a set of reciprocal promises which generates rights and defines the duties which should be fulfilled as contractual obligations. Simple form. Contract management versus administration. We use the words management and administration's words interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference between the approaches of management and administration. How? Suppose management is nothing but it is an art of getting the things done. Whereas administration is an approach to follow the rules and regulations strictly, not just concerned about the management of aspects, means how the work is getting or what is the output or say. Mostly it concentrates and revolves around the following the rules and regulations scrupulously. So, in a theoretical terms, we are basically administering the contracts. Means, since it is a legally binding nature of the contract, it is better to call it as a administering the contract. Means we have to follow the rules and regulations of the contract. Means what is written in the agreement. Fulfill your obligation and try to enforce your right. So basically we are administering the contracts. So though we call it as a contract management, basically it is a administering the contract. But these two can be used interchangeably. Just to understand the approaches, I am highlighting this aspect. Now, if you apply the same principle for the construction contract, there is an employer, project owner, and the contractor, other party, for execution of the work, signed a contract for execution of an infrastructure park. Now, we will see what are the detail next, what are the duties and obligations of both the parties under the contract. But fundamentally, the primary and fundamental obligation of the contractor under the infrastructure projects contract or a construction contract, what we call, is to do the work in time as agreed in the scheduled period with quality. That is the prime obligation of the contractor. And on the other side, what is the prime and fundamental obligation of the employer? Of course, there are other obligations to give the site drawings, but what is the prime and important? That is to pay, release a consideration, pay as per the contract terms and conditions of the agreement. Right? We will see in detail what are the obligations contractually in a construction contract. Now, in a construction contract, what would be the employer's obligations? Obviously, handing over of the site, handing over of the work fronts in time. There can be obligation of supply of agreed materials in time. In certain contracts, the cement or steel or structural steel or certain construction materials are agreed to be supplied by the owner. Then supply of this is an obligation in time. Issue of drawings and conveying the decisions and approvals, sanctions in time. That is also basic obligation of the employer. And delivery of the agreed facilities means, suppose an employer has agreed in the contract to give the water or say power or any other facility like a piece of land for erecting a stockyard or say for facilities, then but they have to be handed over in agreed timelines. So these are basically the obligations from the employer side. We have already seen that payment as paying the contractor in time as per the agreed terms is the fundamental and the prime obligation of the employer, right? Of course, there may be other obligations also. Just as a normal practice, I have just highlighted these employer's obligations in general. Now, what can be the contractor's obligations in a construction contract? It is execution of the work in time as per the stipulated time period in the agreement. Show the progress, and there may be some timelines, not only just project overall completion, but there may be some timelines like intermediate milestones, or there may be some progress agreed. You have to show 1/8 of the progress at least in the 1/4 of the agreement scheduled period. Likewise, there can be some intermediate milestones or progress timelines. And a contractor has to maintain the quality and good industry practices during the execution. Apart from this, there can be some special obligations also. A contract terms and conditions may specify that a contractor may have to give a notice, means notification of hindrance events if it is occurring, or if any extra item or variation item is there, it may specify a term that the contractor has to notification, right? And often such notifications are tagged with a timeline within 45 days of occurrence. Then as a special obligation, the contractor has to fulfill all such obligations. Also, there can be terms and conditions on claim notification. If a claim is there, he has to notify within a time period. So these can be some special obligations under the contract which have to be scrupulously followed. Apart from this, there can be some implied obligations from the contractor side, means seeking extension of time in time, and also statutory compliance. As a contractor, as an executor, the contractor is supposed to adhere to certain laws pertaining to the welfare of the labor, like payment of minimum wages or other statutory obligations like giving the leaves to them, maintaining some facilities and welfare measures at the site. Likewise, minimum wages he has to pay, insurance he has to take. Likewise, there can be, and also payment of taxes as per the laws. It is the duty of the contractor. These are implied obligations. These need not be specified. And other specific submittals. Contract terms say that every month, in the first week, the contractor has to give his progress achieved, other together with certain machinery, manpower details, whatever it may be. Say certain periodic reports or submittals. If agreed, they have to be submitted to the project owner. So these are some of the obligations in general. There can be other specific obligations under contracts also, specifically case to case basis. Now, let us now study the what are the duties and functions of the contract manager. What are the functions of a contract management? Means when a contract manager is posted at a site, what he should do, what is his function, and what are the skills he required to acquire. As we see, correspondence is one of the most important requirement of a good contract administrator. We will be seeing at the sites day in and day out. Everybody is indulged in addressing letters, writing letters. Why the letters are written? The letters are written to produce a documentary evidence for future use. Means what is happening at the site at the contemporaneous time, they are recorded and put on the paper as a documentary evidence. There are three types of correspondence. One is a necessary correspondence, means say one has to maintain certain correspondence to as a proof, as a documentary evidence. That is a necessary which can be used. General correspondence also there, and obligatory. Suppose there is a employer is going to terminate the contract. At once he cannot terminate a contract. He has to give a notice as a show cause notice. Such correspondence or notices are called obligatory correspondence. Here with some tips for the good correspondence I am mentioning here below. Correspondence should be brief. Letter writing should not be lengthy, to the point with brevity. It should reflect the decency and official decorum. It is not a personal letter. One is writing a letter in the official correspondence. It should be with decorum and official sense. No personal remarks or critical comments in that. No sarcastic remarks. When a letter is written with a relevant reference of the, some persons have a tendency to list right from beginning to ending. Not needed. It can be recent 5 or 6 letters, that will do. And the body of the letter is important. What is the history? What is the purpose of writing this letter? And what you want to say ultimately through this letter, it should be mentioned. These are means what you intend to communicate. That should be there in the body of the letter. Of course, it should not be, the correspondence letter should not be lengthy and with a simple language. One need not practice an Oxford level correspondence for writing letters. With a simple language, one can write very good letters. Nothing but it is a simple art of letter writing. Right? These are some of the tips. Apart from correspondence, the contract administrator is supposed to maintain records. Means correspondence is also a good record. And evidence of hindrances. Suppose one is applying for extension of time, then you have to produce what are the hindrances as a record proof. Then correspondence files, one will have it, and also there can be some minutes of meetings, site diaries maintained, and documentation of events. There is a events can be chronologically mapped and documented, right? And again, there can be some site records and as registers normally maintained. Also, there can be some documentation like photos, videographic reports, and periodic reports jointly agreed or submitted as a proof. regarding the deployment of manpower or machinery. Normally, site registers are maintained for various purposes. Some of such registers I am just giving for reference sake. Drawing register. A register showing the drawings, receipt of the drawings with date wise, with details will show what are all the drawings issued and when they were received. So that is a record. When says there is a delay in issue of drawings, through this register one can prove it. There can be day worksheets showing the daily activities and the works quantities executed with the daily reports. There can be hindrance register recording the hindrances. Variation registers will show the variation in quantities occurred at what point of time. In government departments, a site order book is invariably maintained, which records the instructions given by the officers visiting the site. That is a site order book. There can be some materials register on the receipt of materials, consumption of materials, issue of materials. Also, there can be manpower register, plant and machinery deployment register. So many records. These are some of the records maintained in general. There can be more also. Now, maintenance of good site records is always the good in the interest of the project. So the contract manager's duty is also not to just make correspondence, also maintains proper records and documentation. Okay, that is the important duty of the contract manager or contract administrator and his team at the site. Reconciliation of materials, which is one of the most important aspects. What is a reconciliation? This is an exercise which is done to correspond the receipt with utilization of materials. For example, important materials like steel, reinforcement steel, cement or structural steel or any other construction materials which are very costly are received at the site. How much is consumed and what is the balance? How do you check the consumption? There is a theoretical consumption to assess the theoretical consumption. What should have been the theoretical consumption for the executed quantity? There are various methods. For cement, there are coefficients. For steel, it can be measured length and converted to linear coefficients. So many methods are there. So when you compare a theoretical consumption with the actual consumption and check the balance available in stock, that will give a true picture whether there are wastages and how much wastages are there and how much variations are there and whether there is any pilferage or misuse of materials or negligence. All this can be ascertained by periodically reconciliation of the materials, which is important. If it is done periodically, there is advantage. At the end, there is no use. If you do it periodically at regular intervals, the management can take controlling actions. If something is going wrong, they can check it and some remedial measures can be taken. So receipts, and this is basically as we discussed, receipts and consumption are matched with assessment of theoretical consumption and some standards. With this, theoretical consumption is assessed, check with the actual consumption and check the balance quantity in stock. So this is an exercise. Then you assess the variations or wastages, whether it is a misuse or say overconsumption. What is the problem? One can know that and to take some remedial measures. Of course, balance of stock is always checked, accounting for the wastages and variations. This is a good practice if followed at site. As we see, 40 to 50% of the project cost goes towards the materials. If there is a proper reconciliation, it will add to the profitability. At least 1 to 2% of project cost one can achieve as a productivity following the good reconciliation of materials practices at site. So these are some of the other functions of contract manager apart from maintenance of site records, reconciliation, correspondence. A contract manager should acquire the skills and knowledge regarding the applicability of taxation and taxation issues for the infrastructure contracts. What are the technical specifications for the work? Suppose if one is involved in road work, what are the technical specifications for road work? If it is in building work, for the building specifications, right? And also billing and QS, quantity survey as a skill, rate analysis, assessing the variations and valuations, understanding the contract and how do you work out a valuation methods, rate analysis, how do you work out the rates or valuation for extras, items or variations. Again, MIS, Management Information System, periodic reporting and communication of the reports, planning of the resource, progress monitoring, controlling, budgeting. These are also the skills the project managers, contract managers at the site are required to possess. Of course, budgeting and quality control aspects. And what are the general laws applicable for construction contracts? Not only Contract Act, but what are the statutory compliance aspects? A construction project in general requires more than a dozen laws have to be adhered to regarding the construction trade. They pertain to what are all the minimum wages payable to the workers, Contract, Labor and Regulation Act. Also, it deals with the welfare measure of the laborers. That one has to have a basic knowledge of all such laws applicable as a statutory compliance. We will deal next topic in that as I told you, statutory compliance aspects. For any support or help in management of infrastructure contracts, you can reach me at this email ID. Thank you. Please keep watching this YouTube channel, all contract management topics for infrastructure. The handle for this is @infra contracts guru. If you type this in the YouTube channel in the search option, you can directly access this channel. Please subscribe and popularize this channel. Thank you.